Welcome back, everyone, to Tech Talk, the officially unofficial Transformers TCG podcast. I'm joined, as always, by Scott of VectorSigma.info. And Scott, we're going a little bit off the beaten path today. It feels a little weird.
I guess.
Well, it's
we haven't talked about it before.
Yeah, well, that's why it's off the beaten path. Typically, we're always focusing on, and I'm sure it'll come up, we're always focusing on the strategic element of the gameplay itself and deck building and everything surrounding those topics. But the difference today is we're going to be talking about strategic elements within the game surrounding the game somewhat. And it's going to sound like we're talking about the general meta, but it's more on the economic line.
Yep.
So, but before we get there are a couple, we'll call them big ticket, high level news items that are actually coming up in the very near future. And by the time this hits your ears, if you're not listening to it live, may be right on the doorstep. So the first one that we wanted to talk about was, well, the championship for the Pro Play Tour is coming up very, very quickly. That's going to be at the end of this month, January, and it's an exciting event. I know you're going to it, Scott. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend. I'm going to do my best to make it to some local events that are being held on the same day or same weekend. But we're definitely going to have a Vector Sigma presence down there.
Yeah, Dan and I are going. There's a lot of patrons going. Obviously, we have members of the team that are part of the PPG family as well, so there will definitely be a representation.
Absolutely. But are you more excited about going to Disney World, Scott, or the tournament itself?
No, we're actually going to go to Universal one day. We're not hitting Disney itself. So.
Okay, yeah, that having done that relatively recently, it could certainly drain your energy for a given event. I'll put it that way, in a good way, I guess. But leading into it, any preliminary thoughts about the event, Scott? Anything that you want to share with the masses before the event itself comes upon us?
No, by the time if you're not listening live, by the time you hear this recorded, there's an opportunity out there to hear an interview with George Machado, who's who's the owner of PPG. So there's a lot of information that's there. I guess the most important thing is there's an interesting line between secondary run events or primary run events, and I would look at the PPG Tour more in the latter, where there's a lot of WotC interaction and partnership with PPG on these events. So from that aspect, I mean, I'm very hopeful that we'll get information soon about future events. So I think that this represents a great opportunity on a monthly basis to have high level Transformers events.
Yes, for sure.
So I think it's important to treat each one of them as such, as like a larger local, depending on where the stops are, but definitely for the championship level event that occurs every year, as a much larger event from there. And I think that, keep in mind, there's only 3 relatively small events leading up to this. So if we give all of 2020 the same runway that we've had with other things, I think it'll be a much bigger event next year, both from a prize perspective and from an attendance perspective. But I am expecting, for the Sunday event, even though technically going into it, there's probably only let's just say 40 to 45 qualified players due to the in-store kits and the official events. But there's going to be a lot of last chance qualifiers on site, and pretty much as soon as they get 8 people, they'll sign up. It's not like it has to be every hour on the hour. So I anticipate there being a lot of people that qualify over the first couple days of the event, which is great. Win a box 8-mans that are going on. Mm-hmm. So to be honest with you, there should be a lot of opportunities for anyone to qualify for Sunday, and then I anticipate I'm assuming there's going to be 65 to 70 players total, which would put it at right in line with some of the larger Gen Con on-site qualifiers.
Yes. Yeah.
Which at this point were the second largest events that occurred, which is, pretty decent.
Absolutely. I mean, as you said, going forward through the rest of 2020, there's going to be a lot more momentum building up because, as you said, there were only really 3 events leading into this. So in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of short notice, quote unquote. But since we're going to be, it's now a thing, we're going to build up that momentum throughout the year. And I'm in agreement with you that I expect that there's going to be a significant turnout. I think it's going to be a lot of very strong players. And I think that it's going to be a great way, whenever the schedule officially releases for this year, for people to continue to either get their feet wet or stay in shape, so to speak, as they're looking at the other major events by continuing to play in events with other high caliber players.
Yeah, that's all that really matters to me. I mean, you have to understand that like some of the scheduling of some of these things takes time. They need to
absolutely
analyze how things went. I mean, we're trying to speak to Wizards relatively soon about some ideas and speak to PPG as well in order to try to bring some of this back to the store level as well.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to. Excuse me. I feel really bad that I was unable to just schedule it this quickly, but I'm going to be making every effort to try and get out to some of these other ones because we've said it a lot before, but the fun part of the game for us is competing against strong opponents, playing in these larger level events that, if that's not your thing, that's fine. You could come and hang out. You could always spectate. I'm sure there will be a stream. But for us as competitive players, this is what we get all excited about.
Yep.
So, any other thoughts on PPG before we move on and segue into the other upcoming major event?
No, most of the information is in that interview that Dan had with George, so make sure you take a listen to that if you haven't already.
Awesome. So the other major event that's on the horizon is actually Pax South. So we did get some official information as to what we can expect to be going on there. There is going to be an open. There are going to be some uncut sheets that are going to be there, as well as Energon editions up for grabs as prizes. It's good to see that it is coming back to the other PAX events. Not that we were ever really expecting that there wouldn't be a Transformers TCG presence there. There are some challenges with it. Obviously, the schedule, we all would love to have had this way in advance, but we've talked about that on other shows that sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles.
Yeah, especially at the beginning of the year, it seems to be the case.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a bunch of contractual things or other logistics that come into play, and it's the way it is. But for anybody that is able to attend, there is Transformers TCG to play with some awesome stuff on the line. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, there's been no indication that this has any bearing on the 2020 Energon Invitational, correct?
You don't qualify through it, no.
Right.
As far as I understand now.
That's what I had also, I was going to say saw, but I guess I didn't see. There was no information indicating that. We still are waiting on details from that from the Wizards team. But this is only the second time that you're going to have the opportunity to win uncut sheets. I'm actually kind of curious, now that I'm saying it out loud, what sets those are going to be.
It's the third time. Technically, they gave some away in Europe as well.
Oh, they did give them. You're right. Yep. I forgot about that. So, but still, very, very few chances to obtain something like that. It is really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool collector's prize. If you ever were to frame it, like I still have yet to do, it's definitely a good collector's item.
Yeah, it's something that I always hear about it. It was really awesome seeing it in person when you and John had won them. So, other than that, I don't know. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up specifically about PAX before we move into the main topic of tonight, Scott?
Well, Pax South is technically a week before the PPG event, so it'll probably have a dramatic effect on the metagame there.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I find interesting about it is that the way that they're doing the qualifier tournaments for the Open on Sunday is different than they've done in the past, but I think it's probably just due to the nature of the prizing or whatever. And in that there's only four qualifiers on, right. I think, Friday and Saturday, and you have to go 4-0. And it's not, I read it over and over again to make sure it wasn't like, it's at 12 match points, and it wasn't just you had to have 4 wins. I assume it's only going to be a 4-round event. I don't know what time they're running because I'm not going, so I didn't pay too much attention to the time. But I have to assume you can play in both with a decent break in between, if that's the case.
Right.
But what's interesting to me is that only going 4-0. It's only going to be a 4-round event, so no matter how many players show up, like I don't know exactly what the cutoffs are, but like let's just say there was, I think it's 32 or more players. Let's just say technically, according to like the floor rules and everything, you'd be running 5 rounds, but they're only going to run 4, which means you're not actually cutting down to like the way, and just the way those rounds work is because you're trying to get to one person being undefeated. That's not actually the goal. That's not actually the goal here. It's just
correct.
You could have like 8 to 10 people that are still 4-0, for example, and all get qualified for Sunday. But I actually believe what's probably going to wind up happening is it's going to be probably more difficult to qualify because I mean you have literally no margin for error. So it should be a pretty high powered event. I mean, there's gonna, no matter how many people show up, the difficulty of the event is just going to drive the need to be playing something that's like more flexible and it pretty well because there just really is no margin for error. I mean, I know that like I think I lost my first round in the first qualifier at Gen Con and went undefeated the rest of the way. But like,
yeah, that knocked you out here.
Right, exactly. So, a lot of decks are matchup dependent. So you just have to be careful with that and understand your matchups and things like that because it's going to be, according to everything I can think about the event, it's just going to be more difficult. But the prizes are more unique.
Absolutely.
I don't really know how to put. I mean, I when someone asked, I tried to put a value on the uncut sheet of Wave 1 when it was still like only Wave 1 and came up with a pretty hefty number. So depending on what these are, and all the ones I've seen given out so far have been Wave 1, but that doesn't mean that these necessarily will be. So they're just a very unique prize that carry their own value to them. So like, I don't want to say they're like, invaluable or whatever, or they're like something ridiculous, but there aren't that many of these things out there. So like, it's a pretty unique prize.
Yeah, I would imagine most people are going to treat them. I mean, I'm sure somebody is going to cut them up and sell them or try and offload them as a single sheet. But I would imagine many people, I know I would be treating it like a trophy because it is so unique. Unless somebody offered me something ridiculous, because let's be real.
I think first place gets 3 sheets or something like that too, from what I saw.
Wow. Okay. I did not see that one, but that's pretty impressive. Not going to lie.
Yeah. It's like a pretty, if I remember correctly, it's a pretty decent sliding scale of what people won.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Like you said, it's going, both of these events are going to inform, each other as well as the meta moving forward, because we do have a decent amount of time between now and when we're going to see Wave 5, or actually have Wave 5 in hand. So there's a lot of information to be gleaned from these particular events.
Yeah, because I don't think the meta is as defined as one event anyway, as we talked about.
Oh, of course.
In the past, so.
Well, now's everybody's chance to prove it.
Right. Exactly.
Or disprove it, I guess, depending on how you look at it. Oh, excuse me. My throat is killing me.
Dying over there?
Yeah, I'm trying not to. If I go silent for a while, you'll know why. So, anything else for Pax South before we shift gears, Scott?
No, I mean, there's nothing we can really do about in terms of like how quote unquote close it is to PAX Unplugged and the schedule that exists for these conventions. I don't really know where they come up with them, but I think I'm hoping that a year from now, like we can feel confident that even depending on what the time frame of getting this information, we can feel confident that such an event's going to happen.
Yeah,
I think because of when Orlando is happening, I wouldn't have gone to this regardless. But if it was spread out a little bit, I mean, I like the San Antonio area, so I would have probably tried to make my way there. But it's just not in the cards.
Yeah, the reality of it is, well, it's reality sometimes. One thing that I will add to your point is that now that we're seeing this pattern of, there's a presence at every PAX, there's a presence at, we're going to see at every Origins and Gen Con, I assume, that sort of thing, that this cadence, and I know the Wizards team has stated many times that they want these marquee capstone destination events. And to your point, come next year, I mean, obviously it'll depend on, again, real life, but we can, I would think we can go out on a limb and assume that there is going to be something at Pax South. So if it is, if that's your favorite area, then there you go. Maybe you can start planning a trip around it.
Yeah, I mean, I plan to talk to all parties involved. I've tried to in certain ways. Like, I guess I just worry about what the effect of it is on a PAX East and a PAX West, because
there are some logistical problems there.
PAX South and PAX Unplugged are very affordable. PAX East and PAX West are kind of the opposite of affordable. So
yeah, so. I can agree with that. I did remember, but long before Transformers, looking into it one time, and I'm like, I think it might be cool to go, and I'm like, ooh, maybe not. Yeah. Maybe put some brakes on that one. Yeah. So, I guess with that, we can dive into the main topic for this particular episode. And as I started out with, it's strategy, but on a different end of the game, and that is particularly the economics of the game, or the I don't want to say game within the game, but it is kind of if you look at it like playing WoW, the computer game, and everybody who plays the game strictly for the auction house and the marketplace, it's just, well, these cards have real world value.
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at it that much that way in this yet, but I know some people. I don't know that there's many players that do that now. I kind of just look at it like trying to understand what your collection is worth, why it's worth what it is, and how to turn extras into cash, or what to expect out of that of doing that, I guess you could say.
So to that end, Scott, I mean, the obvious thing is, the rarer cards are worth more. Obviously, it's not as simple as that, because there are certain rares and even super rares that, you're not exactly excited to open, and nobody's reaching to, rip them out of your binder because, oh my God, we need these. So I guess that's as good a place as any to start. When you're evaluating cards, whether it's from now, say the middle of, or if we call this the middle of a metagame, versus when a new set comes out, or when it's the tail end leading into a new set, any pointers or how would you describe that process for what you do? Because I know you personally end up interacting with this end of the game a lot more than I do.
Sure. So just for those that don't know, I have like one of the largest Transformers only, probably the largest Transformers only stores on TCG Player. So this is
hashtag like humble brag.
This is not a commercial for that, but in 6 to 8 months of doing cards, I bought and sold a lot of Transformers cards over the past 6 months. So I have a bit of knowledge as to where this lies.
A bit.
Just so people know.
I think I've sold like 3, if that.
Yeah.
So lead us in, Scott. There's a lot of different things that we could talk about. Like I said, whether it's evaluating how to find that diamond in the rough, although that does kind of lean into also the strategy element, because of course the better cards are going to be more valuable.
Not always, but sure.
Right. But that's where I'm going to kick it over to you. So when you're evaluating, looking for these things, is there a secret you can divulge, or how do you evaluate these things?
So the first thing is it's different. It's been different in certain waves. The last 2 waves have been similar to one another, but the first 2, if you treat Siege 1 and 2 as the same type of set, there's been 3 types of sets that have come out.
Okay.
And actually there was an issue with Siege 2 that made it a little bit more, a little bit different than Siege 1, which I could talk about. But the distribution for Wave 1, Wave 2, Siege 1, and Siege 2 have all been different.
Yes.
So, and we will get into this later, but not counting the reissue through Energon Edition, the distribution in Wave 1 was much more, not difficult, but like stingier, I guess you could say. So most rares in Wave 1 were simply rarer, and the super rares were much rarer than they were in
All the subsequent sets.
Yes, and I think all the subsequent sets from a super rare perspective were the same. But what that winds up doing, and what they went up doing for a long time, and has done for a long time, was set the market on the battle cards from Wave 1 as being much higher than the other sets. It is not simply due to the power level of them and the commonality of them in competitive decks, but it's also the pure rarity. Also, Wave 1 is a, quote, larger set because there is no inserted card like there was in Siege 1 and Siege 2. So, the Battle Masters and the Micro Masters coming one to a pack means that even though, quote, like Six Gun and Brunt are, quote, rare, they're really not.
Right.
So, and all those playable cards, like, will count from a set number perspective and how many cards are in the set, but they're not actually part of, like, how rare a card is. So in Wave 1, there were simply just more battle cards, more rares, more characters, etc. And because you had a harder rare distribution and definitely a harder super rare distribution, people are just opening more packs. So even though there is a decent amount of supply, for a while there wasn't, because of it selling out and it doing so well that the battle card prices on Wave 1 went way up. Like we saw certain rares get over, I think the highest they ever went is like $22, $24.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, and they're back down now for other reasons that we'll get into later. But in general, the Wave 1 rares have held the most value from the battle card perspective. So the real key is there's a difference between character rarities and battle card rarities, and one does affect the other. And it's simply a matter of, once you have a character, unless you just don't feel like playing it in more than one deck, but it doesn't really work that way when you're actually playing the game. So an individual character may cost more than an individual battle card, but the price of 3 battle cards will typically be more than the price of one. Definitely one rare character. One super rare might be a different story.
Right.
And that's just the way it works out. So in the first couple waves, that pretty much held true. The rarity on the characters and the price of those cards will be affected basically by how much product is actually opened. And the interesting thing about Siege 1 and Siege 2 is the reason why the rares from a battle card perspective are so low is because there's just less of them in the set, again, because of the insert situation. But what winds up happening is you can buy when you buy boxes of Siege 1 and Siege 2, so when you buy like a case, for example, you usually got like 2 to 3 super rares in the case. But the problem is you have 5, 6, 7 of each battle card rare, and definitely and almost always rare characters in multiples.
Correct.
So at that point, the only reason to buy more boxes as a player, not as a secondary dealer, is to try to fish for the super rares that you still need, and that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah,
that didn't happen in the first 2 sets.
I was going to say that trying to fish for a given rare via just cracking packs often is a losing proposition.
Right. So if you think about Wave 1, for example, you could get a play set of battle cards by buying a case pretty easily. But a lot of decks, I have, security checkpoints and Peace or Tyrannies and Matrixes, the staple cards that are worth the most money in multiple decks, and I don't feel like switching from one to another. So it's perfectly acceptable to have like 6 to 9 of certain rares as a player. Like, that's pretty typical. Like, at least 6, I would say. Pretty typical to have multiple play sets of a battle card. No problem. Well, in Wave 1, you had to buy a lot of boxes in order to, without buying singles in the secondary market, in order to make that happen or trade for them, etc.
Right.
Equal value. Like, you had to buy a lot of boxes to make that happen. And it wouldn't necessarily work out where, like, you were not, obviously if you were getting doubles of the rare characters, super rare characters, sorry. But, like, it wasn't, you didn't have a mountain of battle cards that you needed a mountain of characters you needed compared to a mountain of battle cards sitting on your desk. Yeah. It was kind of even in that way. Like, you were opening one to try to get the other. But once the distribution changed, and especially in Siege 1 and Siege 2, you were opening boxes to try to get characters, especially super rare characters, and then you were winding up with oodles of rare characters and battle cards, rares in multiples. So what winds up happening in that situation is you basically have like the 1%ers, for example, like super rare prices are through the roof because there's no reason to open the boxes except to try to get those super rares.
Mm-hmm.
So like as an established player, again, like you might buy a case of every set. You won't get a complete set. You will not get all 4 super rares. You will get everything else. So now, like I said, the question is, what am I going to do with all this extra stuff? So if I buy a second case, like, and I don't get the guys I need, now I suddenly am swimming in rare battle cards and in rare characters.
Absolutely, yeah.
If I don't have an outlet in order to trade them away to another player for the ones they got, or if I got a duplicate of a super rare and swap it for somebody else's super rare, like, you're literally just swimming in this stuff. So, like, what are you supposed to do with it? So at that point, the super rare prices just go way up because people don't want to do that.
When you say that, you're saying buy more sealed products. So it kind of artificially regulates, or not artificially, but it kind of self-regulates there.
Yes. Like, players don't want to own that many duplicates.
So to some extent, it's actually depressing the sold product to some extent, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Not necessarily, but it's to any one individual player, yes, because they eventually are just like, I don't need any more of this.
Right. Yeah, in the grand scheme, like somebody, a store or a dealer is buying that, but the individual player is then picking it up via singles or trading, is what you're saying.
Right. So every other card, like the rare prices go down. Like the price per card on a rare basis, again, playability will come into play, but the prices on the rare battle cards are depressed. The prices on the rare characters are depressed, but the prices on the super rare characters are inflated. And I don't mean inflated to like they're over market. It's just that the amount of them out there, the supply of them out there is just so much less because people aren't opening as many boxes. And the only way to get them is by opening boxes. But if your whole goal is to just get them, the chances of getting them, I mean, first of all, the chance of getting, again, I look at things from a case perspective. There's 2 to 3 super rares per case. It's not fixed as to which ones you're going to get outside of distribution issues that happen with Siege 2. But so like you're not even guaranteed to get the ones you need. You're going to hit a wall as to like, do I really need this much more product? Again, a secondary dealer, etc.
Right.
So it just becomes, what am I going to do with all this extra stuff? I'm not going to buy any more product. I just can't. I have everything I need. I'll just buy those singles that I need. But everybody's in that same boat. Everybody wasn't in that same boat for Wave 1 because I want more battle cards. The character prices, therefore, stay in line with the battle card prices. It hasn't been that way from then on out.
Sounds logical to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and over time, there are other components to it, I think, as well as, by definition, the 5th wave is not going to be as large of a percentage increase in the card pool as previous sets. So how many cards are suddenly going to make that big splash that are going to be immediately tournament staples? How many of, like, quantity-wise, how many from a displacement perspective of, okay, it's not just that there were 20 top-tier cards in Wave 5. There were 20 that also beat out previous things and didn't create new archetypes themselves. So it like if there was a better grenade launcher, not that that's going to happen, but just as an example sort of thing.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, again, it's going to depend on, it always is going to depend on if they change the distribution, if there's an insert type card that is not, that affects the number of cards in this set. And if they keep the same number of, super rares, which they have for the last 3 sets, at 4, and those are very good, like they are in Siege 2, they're going to become extremely high priced because, again, there just isn't as much of that being opened. And, like, if I got 8 of a battle card rare in my case and I didn't get the super rare I needed, it's just more efficient to go out there instead of having 16 of it.
Right.
Just go buy that single. And if a large majority of the population is in that same, is in that same boat, basically, you just have a supply and demand issue when it comes to the super rares.
Absolutely. So speaking of supply and demand, we recently got the Energon edition in people's hands. How do you feel something like that? Did it really mess with the metrics that you've seen? The numbers for the Wave 1 stuff that we already established was a little bit of an, I don't want to say isolated event, but it definitely behaved differently from a market perspective than the subsequent sets? Or is it just they're their own entity because they are quote unquote promos or special versions?
Well, the specials and promos and the special character cards and the foils are their own entity. So they have their own price depending on like whether people just feel like picking them up or not. And they actually haven't sold all that well because I think people that wanted an Energon edition to get everything
they just bought the Energon edition.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how many people are just looking for the foil living weapon. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they're probably getting all of them. You're right.
Exactly. Like it's like, if you wanted just the foil battle cards, I've seen some people just pick up a playset of the foil battle cards. And so it looks enticing to want to, oh, well, if I go on TCG or somewhere else and I price out all the cards individually, I'm going to get the 200. It seems worth it. Yeah, but there aren't many people picking up those characters. So they have to decrease in value as time goes on. The major effect that Energon has had is so at first, so like pretty much the entire month of December, it's picked up recently, which I'll get back into, but the fact that each one of them came with a box of Wave 1
right
simply put more Wave 1 battle cards and characters out into the market. So you have two effects. First of all the characters that were reprinted in the Energon edition in the specials, the special printing and the plastic cards, they've all gone down in value significantly.
The actual Wave 1 versions you're talking about.
Yeah, so like the biggest one to go, I mean, obviously Cliffjumper and Slipstream like took massive.
Well, those those ones I think will also get their own category just by virtue of their own rarity.
Right. But pretty much, and I think this was intentional, and I'm fine with it, obviously. That if you needed those cards before, you were willing to pay whatever $150 to $175 each, but now you're not going out there and saying I have to have the SDCC version of this card. You're fine with the playability perspective of just having one of the Energized
if it's
so
function over form in this case. I guess.
Right. So they've gone down significantly. Like they were going for easily close to $150. They're close to the market price is close to 100, but they don't really sell at those prices. So all the SDCC cards have come down. I know that the odd attacks and tandems are in the mail now. I haven't got mine yet. But those haven't been affected yet. But there aren't that many of those battle cards out there in the world as it is.
Also, I mean, this is a totally separate topic, but there are rumors of concerns about the physical cards themselves that may influence that, or do you think that's not going to have any impact? As far as like the identifiability of the cards.
It is a concern, but I don't think this isn't the type of game where I feel like that matters that much, to be honest with you. Obviously there is that nature to them. I understand that, but at the same time, like they're not that playable to begin with.
Yeah.
So like their prices were inflated as it was.
Right.
Because of compared to their playability, it was literally just a rarity thing. So I don't think it'll matter all that much. I don't think they will have to. The original versions will have to go down,
of course.
But I didn't rush out and sell every single one that I had,
right?
On purpose, assuming that these versions would depress them. But they continued to sell even after it was announced. So at not extremely depressed prices, just because they hadn't been available yet.
Yeah,
physically in people's hands.
Makes sense.
But the biggest thing is like all those characters, all 6 of those characters went down in price tremendously. They're normal versions. So like Nemesis is pretty much cut in half, almost.
I mean,
some of the other ones.
To be fair, most of them. Most, is that accurate? I think most of them weren't really. They weren't as popular as they were for a while anyway, kind of thing. So maybe it was a long time coming.
I mean, they weren't as powerful as they used to be, obviously.
Right. That's my point, is that because they weren't crushing it at top tables, maybe they were doomed to this end anyway, whether it happened like this or not.
Not this rapidly. When you simply could spend $200 to get all of them guaranteed, the prices of the like people that didn't have them before, it's still cheaper to get the original versions of them if you don't want to spend the $200 all at once.
Of course,
but the prices have.
But you got to come in under the cost of, well, I could just spend $200 and get everything.
Right.
So.
And besides that, the other big thing is each Energized Edition comes with a box of boosters.
Yep.
So there's a good percentage chance that those 6 cards are going into the market again.
Exactly.
So for those specific characters, it's a double whammy. I don't necessarily see those 6 characters recovering from this from a price perspective. I guess I should say those 4 characters, because Slipstream and Cliffjumper obviously aren't in the boosters.
Right.
But definitely the price on like Battlefield Legend and Nemesis being the 2 most playable were pretty much slashed in half from Energon Edition, and then the other 2 weren't really playable to begin with. Legendary V saw some play, but his price has been steadily dropping for a long time, so
right,
it wasn't the biggest deal in the world. There was only so much lower he could go as a super rare from a simple collectability standpoint, because the thing you have to understand about this game is that there's a lot of collectors as well that don't actually play the game.
Well, that's a good segue into how do you feel collectors necessarily impact things versus other players in the market, whether it's literally players, people who may lean towards more just being a dealer. How do you feel these parties interplay with each other, or does it really matter? I mean, obviously it matters, but just setting the stage.
So I think, I mean, myself as a dealer, I don't run into a lot of collectors because the platform that I sell on just isn't visited by a lot of them compared to other platforms.
Right.
So I think most collectors probably stick to eBay or other sites that would, if you just Google Transformers TCG, you could probably find easier. I don't know. I'm assuming TCG Player comes up, but it's not.
May not be their first realization as to where to look.
Right. I mean, there might be other transfer sites selling them and things. I'm not sure.
Right.
So collectors drive the price of supply and demand out there in the world, but they don't really affect me personally as much, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But in this game, I do think they do drive the market a lot, because, especially on the character side.
Oh, that's what I would expect, yeah.
Yeah, definitely more on the character side. And what I can tell you is where collectors drive value is in the common and uncommon characters, especially in things like Combiner Team. Like,
it's a good point.
Things like Firecons, or things like popular characters that don't necessarily have
tournament shops.
Right. Or like the cards aren't very good, but the character themselves is very popular. So like your Alpha Trions, your Star Screams, your things like that, I think are being driven by collectors.
It's probably a good argument for Living Weapon having some of the price tags that he did in the past.
Yeah, his price tag is not very high anymore, I can tell you.
Well, but that was the discussion. Yeah, we did cover that part. Well, aside from collectors, one of the other parties that I brought up was the players. So the obvious thing that would tie into what we usually talk about is the tournament scene, and clearly playability influences these things. I mean, yes, there are collectors, there are other non-game related reasons that are going to inflate or deflate cards' value. But obviously, the other end of it is, if you start seeing these certain battle cards, these certain characters show up in every top 8 list, it's presumably going to gin up some interest. So do you feel that as we've gone through now almost a full year, or probably 3/4 of a year. What we already did the recap episode. I'm not going to do the months in my head. Of tournament play, did you see different fluctuations based on, oh, well, this did well at Origin, so 2 weeks later the price spiked, or this did well at Gen Con, so 2 weeks later this went up or this went down?
Certainly. Nothing affects prices more than tournament results.
I mean, that's logically what I would expect in a card game, but go ahead.
Especially on the battle card side, that's certainly because on a battle card perspective, like, you can have disparate character lineups and have the same battle cards, and that happens very often.
Right.
Especially for the stable ones. But it also, what the other major effect that it does is turn other cards into stable.
Right.
From that perspective, the biggest effect on singles prices, whether it's characters or, but especially on the battle card side, is sustained finishing. It's no flash in the pans. Flash in the pans finishes at certain events will basically do a temporary boost in price, and some people will speculate on, oh, this was in a deck that did really well. I'm speculating, and I'm going to buy you out. Whatever, that deck doesn't do well the next time at all, or doesn't have sustained viability throughout the season like it was during the EIQ season. The cards will go back down in price because nothing, like, you can't buy out cards like you can in Magic. So it doesn't really work that way because the game is so new and you have so many players coming in and out at any time that, like, the actual supply of some of the stuff is much higher than what it actually appears at any one point in time. Like, for example, I never list my entire inventory at once. So chances are, like, I'm not sold out of something, even if it looks like I was.
Right.
I could just be waiting for it to go back up or something like that. So that's another factor I think you kind of mentioned before, but there's a lot of people trying to get in and out of this from a seller perspective all at once. And I'm trying not, the one thing I would recommend to anyone thinking about doing it, you have to have a tremendous inventory in order to keep up. Otherwise, you're just going to be left with a pile of unsellable stuff, and it's not worth it in the end. Just as it's some general advice.
Are you saying that, like many other things, it's you got to put in the effort?
You have to maintain the effort is more of the issue. You can put it in at one time, but, like, you won't be able to sustain it. But I can get into that later.
Well, I mean, was there anything else you wanted to touch upon for the tournament results? Because you had said that sustainability versus the flash in the pan type cards. Is there an example of something that you could throw out there that, you know, spiked and then dropped off the face of the earth, sort of thing?
I'll give examples for both.
Sure.
So the ones that spike and stay up there are all your tournament staples. So your Peace for Tyrannies, your security checkpoints, your matrices. So the top cards out of Wave 1 are those, plus Energon Axe, plus the bigger they are, plus Rollout. Those are the biggest cards from Wave 1, for example. And you see those cards over and over again show up in tournament lists.
Well, maybe not Rollout, but yes.
Well, it's still in some.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, it does show up. It's just not as prevalent as the others.
Right. But anytime it is in a tournament deck, like it was in the Jetfire deck, the top 8 Energon edition, it takes another spike because, again, remember, the Wave 1 battle cards are always going to be worth more because there's just of them out there when you buy buy boxes. So those always go up and down in value. Some of them are a huge spike. Like, for example, Matrix is almost double its value that it was pre Energon Invitational because you have a full playset in Jetfire decks. You have a full playset in Galaxy Prime decks. You even have them showing up in other decks now because of how good it is.
Right.
So that's an example of a card that, you know, has gone up in value even though it's been out for a long time. So all your tournament staples, like Marksmanship, is way up.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about that since Energon Invitational, really.
A lot of battle cards are that, again, like I said, for playtesting purposes, you want to have more than one playset.
Right, I was going to call back to that because the characters are going to end up in a top loader, and like you said, how often are you really going to need two unless you're playing like testing mirrors and for some reason the other person isn't prepared. But the battle cards, it's very much, we have a bunch of people together, we're going to test. Here, you play this deck and I'll play this other one. I I'm out of peace through tyrannies. I'm out of security checkpoints. I'm out of whatever. There's value in having those additional things. And I guess like many things, like people that play video games, you play an RPG and they give you an item and you hoard it the entire game and never actually use it. Maybe that's what people are doing with some of these.
Right. Yeah, it takes time to switch cards from one deck to another, and it's annoying, especially using different sleeves and things like that. So a lot of players I know at minimum just own 6 of each.
Absolutely.
At absolute minimum.
Yeah, it just logically makes sense. So give something from the other end of the spectrum, because you named a number of cards that have either started out or eventually got to a certain level and have sustained through. Is there an obvious one that jumps to mind of it was there and it's gone?
Heat of Battle had gone to like $3 now. Back to like 50 cents.
And it's funny, everybody out there is probably like, wow, $3, who cares? But for something like that, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, again, you have to understand that the rare battle cards in Siege 1 and Siege 2, there are just more of them out there due to the way the distribution was in the set. So the only battle card from either of those sets that even got to any higher price was Laser Cutlass, which at one point was in double digits, and now it's plummeted in value, even though it actually did see play in the top 8 of the Energon edition. But there were just too many of them out there compared to its demand. So like you said,
the distribution has definitely influenced that because of people trying to acquire other things or, a number of factors.
Yeah, but Siege 1 was, from a singles perspective, just not a good set. So I think what actually happened for a while is people were like, I'm not buying any of this from a box's perspective. I'm just going to buy what I need. And that, at least there's one rare that's $12 or whatever it was. So like, I only have to spend not much to get everything I need out of the set because I don't need rare Fire Cons and rare Needle Nose and rare Alita 1 and some other cards that just don't see play.
So you definitely had that on your list of things, that point you just brought up about the value of certain sets. Now, to you, it was probably obvious going into Siege 1 once we had the full spoiler and just your experience with card games and doing this side of card games or was it so obvious to you that this is the way it would have played out? Or is this something that is obvious only in hindsight?
The 1%er effect of the super rares was not as obvious. They would maintain such a high value when they see tournament play. Now, again, what you have to understand about Siege 1 is that only one of those super, since the banning of multi-mission gear, actually sees sustained tournament play. And so its value is leaps and bounds above the other super rares.
Well,
and
of course.
And what that's done is depress the value of the rest of the set because everyone's literally only looking for that card. So there's only one rare character in the set that's really worth anything, and that's General Optimus.
Right.
And then from a battle card perspective, like I said, you had Laser Cutlass for a while, but a lot of now at this point, it's still the highest, but it's only like $4.50 or something like that. It's actually Energy Pack that's come way up in value. Has gone from like a 50-cent rare to like almost like a $3 or $4 rare.
I mean, that one also logically makes sense given the metagame we saw at the Energon Invitational as well as just the card pool at this stage.
Yeah, and its uniqueness compared to what other cards do.
Absolutely.
So when I'm looking at cards up front, the easiest thing to assess, and because I have to do a lot of this on day 0 when a set comes out, the easiest way to establish a card's value is to look at its comparison to other cards that exist. So if you look at, for example, at like heavy-handed to bigger they are, it was easy to set the price of heavy-handed at the same exact price as bigger they are because they were so functionally the same. It was easy to set the price of Pocket Processor at
Databank.
X times Databank because it had green in it, for example, but had a high value because of knowing that what its power level was. That's the easiest thing to do is just compare cards to existing ones that are out there and then establish the price from there. But actually what happens when a set first comes out is pretty much you tier the cards by rarity, and every card in that, not by rarity, but like by playability within the rarity. And then every single rare that's like those of you that play like video games that, how it's like S tier, A tier, B tier, etc.
Yeah.
I don't know where S came from, but
My understanding is fighting games, but I don't actually, I don't know the history. I know exactly what you're talking about, but it's, I always see it in fighting games. But anyway, continue.
I always see it in gacha games, and I'm always like, what does S mean? Like, I know what ABC means. I don't know what S means.
Exactly.
But, so, like, we actually tiered them, like that, and then basically say everything that's in the S tier, we start at this price. Everything is in the A tier, we start at this price. And then from there, we literally just let market forces affect the prices from there, supply and demand. And then we look at other sellers. Some sellers basically, there's a lot of sellers out there that are just trying to get in and get out. So like they depress the market for a certain period of time.
Right.
But in general, like we just let the market forces affect the cards, and whatever we can get for them, we go from there. Some go up, some go down, some change tiers, etc. Like there's some cards I can explain, there's some cards I can't explain, for example. So
before we segue into the next thing, what is there one oddball that you can't get your head around?
I can't explain shoulder holsters price in the least.
Okay, what is it at? I have no idea.
$6.
What?
Yep.
All right, I got a lot of shoulder holsters I need to throw up on eBay or something.
Yeah, that's an example of one I can't explain at all.
I mean, okay, that one I can kind of so it's quirky. It does something that from a Johnny perspective, it's like, oh, I can do this cool thing. It'll just never happen. Or realistically never happen.
Again, you have to remember that from a battle card perspective, it's driven by playability.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe not so much. Uh-oh, Scott. He dropped out. Where are we at time-wise?
Sorry, lost you.
Yeah, it's all right. The last thing I heard from you was about saying that battle cards are driven by playability, and I said, well, apparently not, and then bang, you were gone. You were that upset over it.
That's the uniqueness about this, is that you would think that like I'm trying to I guess you would assume that Pocket Processor is the highest price layer from a battle card perspective in the set, because it's probably the one that sees the most universal play out of anything.
I mean, I could see that, yeah.
But it's not right now. I don't know if it's speculation that's going on or anything, because I don't really play that game. Mm-hmm. So something's going on to drive the price of shoulder holster, because it doesn't see. I don't think I saw one in the top 8 of any event.
Well, we're going to find out at Pax South and PPG Orlando. Apparently somebody's got something. I mean, just from playing so many other games, there's always that card or that set of cards where it's just inexplicable as to why they're dominating a market. But there's always something like that.
Yeah, but the cards that were those, especially in the newest set, that I would have thought would have happened with those would have been Daring Escape and Overwhelming Advantage, because they play on a unique axis where I mean their prices aren't nothing.
Right.
Again, what you have to remember is like prices go down very rapidly. That's the other thing you have to understand, is because again, it's just a supply and demand thing. And remember, the super rares in the set drive the value of the set overall. The reason why the Siege 2 prices from a battle card perspective and from a character perspective have stayed up there is because you have essentially, I mean, I would argue that all 4 super rares are playable.
Yeah.
Certainly more than like Rise of the Combiners.
Yeah.
And one of them is a premier card in the environment in Galaxy Prime. One of them is a tier 2 deck star in Octone, and then Octone has its own issues from a distribution perspective because of the boxes that got messed up.
Right.
So he's like the rarest one out there from a supply demand perspective in the general public. All those cards have already been bought, but like there's just once you have a character, you don't need it again.
Mm-hmm.
And then Megatron sees play.
Yep.
In tier 2 decks, and then a lot of people run still, and he's definitely a sideboard option. And then like Sound Blaster is probably the least. But the point is, when you have 3 extremely playable super rares, there's incentive to continue to open packs.
Yep.
And so it's not, because not everybody is selling everything they own. It's not always a rising tide. Like it becomes a rising tide raises all ships, instead of what the opposite, that you think like, oh well, there's more battle cards out there in circulation because people want more of them. It's like, it actually doesn't work that way. Because people are just like, well, it's just more effective for me to buy everything. So, and then they keep them. They don't sell them off right away. So
yeah,
there's a lot of demand out there for them. So
it's one of those things that if you take a step back, listen to what you had just said and earlier, and think about the way a lot of this stuff has played out, it logically makes sense as to where the prices for certain things go. I'll admit it's not necessarily something that I would have, without seeing it, necessarily thought of. Like,
in terms of which?
Well, I don't think it's that I would have made the leap, oh, well, the value of specific super rares. I mean, yes, it's logical once somebody says it's like, oh, well, duh, that's exactly how it works. But I don't know that it's necessarily readily apparent that, oh, well, this is the way the prices for this given set are going to lay out because of these factors.
Yeah, the super rares are always the biggest factor.
Right. I mean, now, again,
in everything.
It's so obvious in retrospect. But one of the things that you had brought up, well, 6 or 7 points ago, I guess now at this point, was new sellers versus people actually trying to become a quote-unquote dealer versus people, the turnover in the game of people buying and selling collections, trying to turn them into other cards or other games or other things. How exactly has that played into all of this?
So the main thing you need to understand is that to be an effective seller on one of these secondary selling sites where you're not actually running the site yourself, you have to establish like feedback ratings. And so the only way to establish a feedback rating is to have people buy from you and successfully say that everything went well. Right. And so, and the only way to sell things is usually to be the cheapest, because you're not selling on your own from a site. So until you establish yourself as a credible dealer, people are just basically there to spend the least amount of money as possible. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right. On sites like TCG Player, you can actually you can make an order of like $500 worth of singles and be buying from 10 different dealers, and you wouldn't even know you were buying from 10 different dealers. Right. We each get our orders separately, for example. So to you, it might not even matter other than you get 10 different packages being sent to you. So you would see then at that point when you check out who you're buying from, but you might not even know that going in because of the way the system works. So that being said, certain sellers that come in just in order to establish themselves as being and getting a feedback rating, and so that which affects shipping and all these other things that I don't need to get into. Sometimes you just undercut the market in order to get sell cards and establish a feedback rating. So depending on when new sellers choose to come in, they usually last like a week or two, and then poof, their inventory is gone.
I was about to say that goes to your earlier point that I'm assuming the inventory really is the bottleneck to getting to the next level.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of this in December because of Energize editions. A lot of quote new sellers coming in with like Transformers based names, and then getting a feedback, getting 25 sales, and then I haven't seen them again.
Right.
So, but you have to know that, and you have to battle that. And so for anybody looking to get into this game, you just have to be aware that those things exist.
So, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's it. The easiest thing, as a player, if you're looking to sell, is to sell to a seller. Don't sell on your own. And I'm not saying that because I buy a lot, but it's just the truth.
Well, I mean, there is something to be said for that. That actually was going to be the next thing I was going to lead into for somebody who's either looking to liquidate things because they want to, get some cash to save up for Wave 5, where they just want to turn it into paying for travel expenses to go to PPG Orlando or whatever the case may be. Your recommendation is find a buyer that you would trust, so another dealer, essentially.
if you want to sell in bulk, yes. If you want to sell like a few individual high-priced cards, your best bet is to like use the Facebook page, the sellers page, and things like that, because you don't have to. I'm not saying you have to. You can just be unscrupulous, but I mean, like, you don't have to establish yourself, because you're like, I'm just selling these 5 cards, and when these 5 cards sell, I have what I need, and then I'm done. Like, there's no feedback loop that occurs. So as long as you can find 5 individual buyers, all it does is cost you more in postage.
Right.
But if you're just looking to sell these 5 high-priced cards, for example, there's no reason to like establish yourself as a website or as a seller on one of these third-party sites or anything like that. So just go to a group like that. There's a lot of them out there, and just sell that way. The easiest place is on Facebook or on eBay, and just sell those individual cards.
Right.
If you're looking to unload large quantities of things, the main thing to understand is that, like,
they're heavy, believe it or not, after a while.
Well, how do I say it? Like, people are looking for specific cards.
Of course.
And so you will sell those cards, and you'll be left with a mountain of crap. Like, there's no other way to put it. Like, so your option usually,
not everything shoulder holster. You can't win them all.
Right. Exactly. So a lot of times what happens is, like, you'll get an offer for, you'll sell all your other stuff. All your other stuff will be left, and like what do you? It's not even worth the price of postage a lot of times.
Yeah.
So if you want to sell the whole thing at once, you won't get, quote, market value for it, but at least you'll be buying from a more reputable buyer, and somebody that's going to be, honestly, somebody that can afford to give you some percentage of the money you're looking for. Like, if I'm out there and I just want to buy, say I just need a place at a piece for Tyrannies, right? And I'm willing to pay the market price right now. I think it's like $12 a piece. So, like, I'm looking to spend $36. I'll come to you and say, I'll buy 3 pieces of Tyrannies from you for $35. And you're like, okay, well, that's not bad. That's close to market price. So let's just say you had a playset of Wave 1. I'm just making this stuff up.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden you can no longer advertise that you have a playset of Wave 1, because you sold the piece for Tyrannies, which is obviously one of the key cards that
of course
any buyer would be looking to get from you. And so if I was to, if you were to buy that collection and not pay like $35 for those cards, like you would pay some percentage of the market value. If you're missing cards, that percentage is going to go down even further.
Makes sense.
So if I was willing, if somebody was willing to pay you, and I'm just making these numbers up, like $500 for your playset, and all of a sudden you sold all your good cards away, and yes, the value, if you look at, like, if you go on the marketplace and look at how much the cards actually sell for, it may be worth more. But if it's all a bunch of stuff that, like, adds up because
there's a very small percentage of players that actually want to buy the remainder, I guess.
Right. So, like, instead of getting, whatever, like 70% of value, you might only get like 30% of value, because of what's left is so much harder to move, no matter how much it actually goes for.
Makes sense.
So I guess it just depends on whether or not you're willing to, like, A, be stuck with the stuff, and then B, you want a certain dollar value, and what's more important to you is the dollar value than it's like the price per card, if that makes any sense, like individual like card prices.
Makes sense. So I have bad news, Scott. We didn't make our 45-minute goal, but
man, we had other stuff to talk about.
Well, there is other stuff, but I was going to kick it to you to see if there were any highlights, because there were a number of other things on the list. We could obviously go on and on about this particular topic. So anybody out there listening, if you want to hear more about this sort of thing, or go into one end or the other, definitely hit us up and let us know. But Scott, were there any other highlights that you wanted to bring up surrounding this topic?
No, I guess the big thing out there, like I said, is like there aren't a lot of people that I see out there like speculating or anything like that. So if you are looking to do that at all, I guess, like, the problem is you're not going to find a lot of outlet to sell, even if the card does skyrocket in value. Like, you just be reselling on the same place that you bought them from. So unless you're an established buyer, it's not going to work out too well for you.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of times, I don't think there's been a single card that like we haven't talked about that has done well other than Shoulder Holster. All the cards that we've played or have talked about at length before a set came out have wound up being the ones that are the best.
Well, that's part of the reason why we were excited about them.
Right. It honestly, it's tournament sustainability is what's most important. And you will find that there are some obviously outside the game factors, like when a card gets banned, it plummets in value, for example.
You don't say. That one I could have predicted.
Yeah. Press the Advantage used to be worth a lot more than it is now. Swap Parts used to be worth a lot more than it is now. Multi-Mission Gear is uncommon, so that's a different story. But
yeah.
The big thing is you need to expect that other than super rares, and I guess one big thing that players don't understand is like rares really aren't worth.
Yeah, the introduction of the super rare rarity. I mean, it's always been here for this game, but it was introduced in other games, kind of definitely threw a wrench in things.
Yeah, like a good character that's rare might only be worth like $5 or $6. Like, it's not surprising,
right?
Whereas a super rare is literally worth $100.
Yeah, there's kind of a huge disparity.
Yeah, it's just the supply and demand that's out there in the marketplace. And like I said, the general population of players, even tournament players, don't buy cases upon cases of product. So they typically will buy as many boxes as they feel will get them a playset of battle cards and all the rare characters they want. They'll treat the super rares they open as great. I don't have to buy them in the secondary market, and then they just buy everything else in the secondary market.
Right.
So that's typically what happens. So yeah, the big thing to keep in mind is like your non-staple battle cards and your rare characters, even if they are C-Flight, they're just not worth as much as you'd think they were. Like, and they're clearly not worth like, quote, the price of a pack. So I think people just might overstate in general what they feel their cards are worth.
I mean, that's always true to some extent, regardless.
Yeah. If you want to just look at it from a price guide perspective, use some of these sites as like a price guide. I think people will just become shocked as to like that stuff just isn't worth as much as they thought it was. And like I said, the reason is simply because there's just so much of them out there.
Yeah.
Compared to the super rares, like that, it really gets driven by that.
Are you saying people weren't playing Iron Man Transformers, and that's why we have more cards?
Yes. Yes.
Deep cuts. Probably nobody gets that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a anecdote for another day. Anything else you want to touch on, Scott, before we close up shop for this particular episode?
No, there's not a lot of like secret sauce to it. So like
everything else, consistency is important.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you want to get into this, I'm sure we can, people that want to get into this, we can have much longer conversations about it. But like,
of course,
from a player perspective, the main thing is like, just always know that like, you're always going to be able to find buyers for your stuff. It just depends on how long and how, like, what you're willing to. There isn't a lot of trading I see that goes on in this game, so it's just easier.
That's definitely something. Yeah, that's probably another topic to dive into another day. But that is something that I've noticed. I've definitely come to events with a binder or box or both, and there's just zero interest in that, which is interesting.
I think gaming in general has gone that way. Like Magic still does it because of the vast number of cards that are out there and the vast number of like special versions of cards that are out there, but like it's just easy. Like if everyone's gonna say like, here's my $10 worth of cards and here's your $10 worth of cards, it's literally just easier to sell my $10 worth of cards for a $10 bill and go buy that other $10.
Yeah, I'd rather trade it for green paper.
Right. It's just easier. Yeah. So like there's no point in even like doing that.
Makes sense.
So
yeah, and I think that's definitely the case here.
And you and I are coming at this from a different perspective. Like even before I was selling, and like I know you don't, like we still buy a lot of boxes of the set. So
absolutely.
Like it's hard for us to even imagine what it's like for somebody that doesn't buy that quantity. Like, I still buy a case of each set just to play with, quote unquote. Obviously, I make sure I have a full play set of everything before I start selling like my extra super rares.
Of course.
But like I know you buy a case of every set, so like we're a little unique in that perspective anyway. So
absolutely,
it's hard. We don't look at it necessarily from the perspective of like, oh, I'm just going to buy a box of each set and then move on with life.
Yeah, it's definitely a different outlook, and I have been in that latter position in other games, and it definitely makes life. It like, I mean, this is a more general economics thing, but there's definitely something to be said when you end up paying more in the long run because you are putting yourself at a disadvantage by not having access to certain things, or you're at the mercy of then the market fluctuations of, oh yeah, well, I'll wait to go pick that up as a single, and then it turns out, oh yeah, it spiked because it did well last weekend. Oops. Getting it in this fashion is much more stable.
Yeah, and I got into this habit as a player because I hated needing a rare, or I hated needing an uncommon or a common.
Absolutely.
So I needed to make sure I had full playsets of all of that stuff, and like I was just like, yeah, I know I'm not going to have a full playset of the super rares. And in this game where like you really only need one of each, it was fine. I would just go out and spend the extra money if I didn't get it. And I always would never get the most expensive card in the set, like without fail every single time.
That's usually how it works.
Yeah, so it's just easier to, I would recommend for everyone to go down that route and buy like a case of each set. That's one thing I can put out there.
Definitely makes sense. Well, I think that'll do it for this episode, folks. As I said earlier, if you'd like to hear more about this, definitely hit us up. Or if there are other, I guess, non-strategy topics, this is going to be sort of a mini series because our next recording, or maybe the one before this, depending on how we release them, is going to be another one talking about after. All right, I'm being told it's after. Yeah, coming in on the mic, or on the headset. That we're doing a couple episodes that are strategy adjacent, I guess.
Yep.
So as always, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for watching, and please tune in next time for more Tech Talk.